I'm going to break the mold a little and explain to you why all the personal finance tips and tricks you read about and see online are wrong. Maybe. When it comes to personal finance, a lot of the time it feels like the advice that's given is so cookie cutter. Once you've heard it once, you'll hear it 1,000 times. I don't believe in this. I don't think the same advice should be given to everyone. When it comes to spending habits, for example, I often hear people say that you're better off spending your money on experiences, like vacations, travel, those kind of things. The argument is that stuff doesn't make you happy, but the experiences you have leave lasting memories that you can appreciate forever. I don't know why I see this advice in particular all the time, but it's so stupid because it's literally a personal preference thing. In my experience, these quote unquote things we buy, which for everyone else seems to just collect dust and take up space in their house, has brought me and my family a lot of unique experiences and sometimes provide us with an experience every day that a lot of people don't get to have. In fact, I'd argue that buying stuff is usually the better choice for a lot of people, and I don't think that anyone should be made to feel badly if they prefer their stuff over experiences, because this is a personal preference. It's called personal finance for a reason. I could probably make a whole video on this topic of things versus experiences, so if you're interested in hearing my hot take on that subject, let me know down below. On the topic of personal finance, personal is half of the phrase, but seems to be totally ignored a lot of the time. People have different personalities and goals, and so the advice should not be the same for all these different people. And I'm frankly getting a little tired of seeing the endless online threads about personal finance always boil down to the exact same advice. Get a cheap car, use the same phone until it dies, stop eating out, voo and chill. I get it. If you want to retire early and set yourself up well in life, you need to control your spending. But there's almost never anything personal about personal finance in these online forums. All the advice is one size fits all. Dave Ramsey is another character in this space where I just don't understand why he is so popular. He has a giant business and tons of staff to do a call-in talk show where all of his advice is don't take on debt except for a mortgage, and even then it should only be 15 years maximum. Or hey Dave, which college major should I go for? And the answer is always engineering. Again, I'm not arguing this isn't good advice for most people, but it's the same answers over and over again with no exploration into the type of person who's asking the questions. I'll give an example. I browse Reddit a lot, so I'm going to use this site as an example because frankly, this is where I see a lot of the same advice being pushed ad nauseum and was the inspiration for this video. If I go to the personal finance subreddit and search 16-year-old, one of the first posts is titled Financial Advice for a 16-year-old. The poster's 16 and asking general advice like how to make money so they don't have to work a 9 to 5 for the rest of their life. And then they go on to mention that they know a little bit about savings accounts and stocks, that kind of stuff. The top comment is to check the wiki. Okay, so I go to the subreddit wiki, and under advice for high school students and teenagers ages 15 to 20, I see sections for investing in education talking about college. They have a section right below that talking about STEM. Classic. Though to their credit, they do mention how it's not a good idea to go into a field you're not passionate about. That said, they don't give any other career suggestions, which is kind of weird. The STEM section seems more like a warning. After that, some pretty solid advice on getting started with bank accounts and credit. And finally, a generic section on budgeting and saving like we've talked about. Nowhere in this thread did anyone ask the poster what he or she is interested in to try narrowing down career paths. Nowhere in this thread did anyone ask about the kid's home life or if he or she has two parents that could live with them for a while, or if they'd be helping to pay for college or other expenses. And granted, if this person's asking about how to make money so they don't have to work a 9 to 5 forever, their family probably isn't loaded, but honestly, I'd also probably ask them why they feel that way if they haven't even started working yet. And would they really rather risk being broke and having financial stress over a comfortable, predictable life? I mean, when I was a teenager, I was actually really excited to start working because I really wanted to start earning some money and get some independence once in my life. I didn't really start dreading working a 9 to 5 until I got out of college and got my first full-time job. The same principle could apply to anyone of any age. If a middle-aged person asks what to do with their money, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. Where does he live? Does his family support him at all? Does he have to support his family at all? What job does he have? How much does he make? What's his income relative to the rest of the country? Does he have a spouse? Does he have kids? Does he plan to? Does he like working or does he hate it? If one of Elon Musk's kids somehow found himself on a Reddit forum asking for personal financial advice, I'd tell him nothing matters. He can do whatever he wants. Meanwhile, everyone else would be saying check the wiki. This would be like if I was interested in getting into cinematography and went to a forum that talks about cameras and asked, what should I get? And everyone just answered with the same model. With every other hobby, people dig a little and ask these kinds of questions. Like, are you more interested in photography or cinematography? What kind of subjects are you most likely to capture? Are you going to be doing a lot of low light shooting? Are you using this for social media or something more serious like a business? These are questions I would expect to be asked when I'm looking for advice on picking a camera. Yet with personal finance, it's like, what should I invest my 401k in? And the answer is always VU and Chill or VT Saxon Chill, or like one of two or three other total market or S&P 500 funds. Okay, now maybe you could make the argument that personal finance is less of a hobby and is more of just math, right? I like to think of personal finance a little like blackjack. Let's say it's like blackjack, but with the difference being that if you play quote unquote by the book perfectly every hand, you actually have a slight edge instead of the house having a slight edge. If you want to pretty much guarantee you'll win over the long run, you manage your bankroll by betting small and playing by the book every single hand. Well, what if that's not your goal? What if you want to get the hell out of the casino as soon as possible and are willing to risk going bust? What if you just love the excitement of playing cards and aren't focused on your P&L since you entered the casino? In this scenario, I'd argue that I'm the type of person who really wants out of this casino. I don't want to have to play perfect book blackjack for 40 years to be able to get up from the table. I'm not willing to risk it all on one hand like some other people might, but I definitely would want to up the ante a little bit more than the financial gurus like Dave Ramsey would want from me. But if I called in the Dave Ramsey show asking about investing in individual stocks or crypto, God forbid, to try to get a higher return on some of my money, he'd likely just tell me it's a bad idea. In fact, I quickly Googled the question to see if there were any case of him saying this, and sure enough, the first link on Google is from his website saying, quote, "Let's be really clear here. We do not recommend investing in single stocks. There's just too much risk in tying your investments to the performance of just a handful of companies." A bit later in the article, he says, "Your grandmother was really onto something when she said don't put all your eggs into one basket. It's better to diversify your money so you can reduce risk." I think it's funny they use this quote in particular. I think it's funny because Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest and most successful investors of all time, also talks about putting eggs in baskets. But his quote goes a little differently. Warren Buffett says to keep all your eggs in one basket, but watch that basket closely. So on the one hand, Dave Ramsey has built himself an empire a few times over. His experience with leverage and risk and his troubles with it early on in his life does give credibility to his shtick about avoiding debt at all cost. On the other hand, Warren Buffett is arguably the greatest investor in history, apart from maybe Nancy Pelosi. So which advice is right? Well, I think it depends on the person. The vast majority of people are probably better off listening to the conservative advice of Ramsey. But the fact is that the questions that need to be asked to determine which advice is best for which person simply aren't being asked in these online circle jerk personal finance bubbles. So to wrap up, I'm not saying that any of the traditional wisdom in the world of personal finance is bad. I'm just saying that it feels like it's become a bit of an echo chamber and isn't actually personal like the subject suggests it is. I know there's probably a lot of people asking for the same advice on the same topics over and over and over again, but for the people who do engage, I'd love to see them asking more questions. I'd love to hear some different opinions once in a while that go against the grain. Ironically, a lot of the personal finance influencers out there became wealthy not from following their own cookie cutter advice, but by taking some risk and going down the path less traveled. And I think it would really help the audience if some of these guys would talk about that process and what it was like for them. All right, so that was a bit of a rant, but it's something that's been on my mind. I felt like I had to just get it out there. I feel like I'm going crazy. I go online and I see the same stuff written over and over and over again. Same guys, same gurus are saying the same stuff to the same, well, not even to the same people, the different people. And I just thought this doesn't make any sense. If there's anyone out there listening to this, let me know what you think about it, whether you agree with it or whether you disagree with it. Maybe this isn't as hot of a take as I expected. But in any case, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.